We unboxed this Elite Aerosports BDX a couple months ago, and the assembly begins now. If you missed the unboxing, I will put a link to the build list down below, but check that out first. This is an amazing plane to see come out of the box. Let's take a look at all the equipment we're putting in this aircraft. So as per usual, we're following the normal build procedure here, and we're going to cover all of the equipment as a first step. Starting with our pipe and power plant, we're putting a Swiwin 240 in this aircraft. Nice size power plant for this plane. It only calls for a 180 to 210, I believe, is what the specifications call for. So the 240 is a little bit bigger than suggested. That's what the throttle stick is for, and that's why we got a different pipe. So the pipe is a custom pipe from JT Hobbies, Joe Tamez. Beautiful pipe. It's going to be a beautiful fit in this aircraft. And he also did up the tail cone for us, the stainless tail cone, and that is just a beautiful addition to this aircraft versus the stock fiberglass one that's installed. So working across our table here, we'll cover all the different items. We've got all of our Swiwin equipment right there. V-Speak module, which we're putting in this aircraft. The V-Speak works with any radio system, but this specific one is designed to work with a Swiwin turbine. Of course, we're using a Cortex Demon Pro. We're using all of the stock hardware. The beautiful hardware that comes with the kit is outstanding. So we've got aluminum ball ends, just great looking stuff. I was very impressed with that. The JMB Jets UAT, that's what we're going to be using with this aircraft. This came with the aircraft. It was not included in the price, but the owner included it in the aircraft. We've got all of our MKS servos that are going in the aircraft. So we're using 9930s throughout, and then our standard HV1220 for the nose. Swiwin smoke pump, that's also going in the aircraft, and paired up with the Swiwin smoke pump is the DreamWorks smoke stick. So those two pieces go together. Now we've got our batteries that we used on the 339 build. This is for the same owner. We are going to be adding another 5,000 milliamp Gens Ace to make 3 battery packs. These battery packs are universal for those 2 aircraft. So on the 339, you're only using these 2 batteries. On this aircraft, we'll be using these 2 plus another one of the 5,000s. Control-wise, we're using a Jetty DS24 radio, and that's going to be paired with some of our Jetty components here. So we've got 2 Rec 7s with 40 centimeter dipole antennas. That's going to be our primary receivers. We're using an R3 receiver. This is for our on-off function. And then we've got a Central Box 220. That is the primary hub of this aircraft. Now, the reason some of this stuff's already out of the box is if you're a fan of the channel, you know that we burn in our servos. So all of our servos have been burned in already or cycled, and that's why they're out of their packages. That's all done, a bit of a time saver. We've got the BDX wiring harness. Now this came with the aircraft. It was ordered with the aircraft, so I've never seen one of these in person, so we'll pull this out and take a look at it. But this is an orderable item from Elite Aerosports, and it looks like it uses amps connectors for all of the wing connectors. This will be my first experience with those guys as well. The gear is the standard gear that's designed for this kit. So we've got Electron ER50s, we've got the associated legs that go with it, and these legs were also powder coated white by JT Hobbies, and they did a beautiful job. It looks nice. It's a beautiful finish for this aircraft. With our Electron system, we will be using the GS200 controller. Now this controller, we don't use any of the gyro functions from the controller. All of that is taken care of by the Cortex. So nose wheel is controlled by the Cortex. And our final beautiful piece that's going in this aircraft is our Sky Candy light setup. Now we've got an absolute beautiful full setup here from Sky Candy. Really excited to put this in the aircraft. Leading edge lights, gear lights, top, bottom strobes, rear flashers. It's just going to be a beautiful kit. We've got some instructions and templates and stuff that we'll take a look at as we go through this, but this is going to make this aircraft absolutely pop. Now we've also got a Revic bag set for this aircraft. This arrived quite a while ago, so these have been sitting here and our surfaces have all been sitting in the bag set, but that is perfect protection for your aircraft. And we've got our fuselage sitting on the table. Now the camera does not do this color justice. If you've watched the unboxing video, I mention it in there as well. In the camera, it looks very muted and red. This is fluorescent orange. It is amazing how bright this is. So just a beautiful color scheme. Our first step when we start a project like this is we want to set up a new model in our Jetty radio, and we want to get all of our Jetty products updated. So we're going to get that done. The central box, the 2 receivers, the R3, get all those pieces updated, and that is our starting point. All right, so just getting the basic layout done in the radio here. So we've updated all of our items. I want to make sure all of our ports are laid out and everything is done with the model. So what I've done is I've gone in and I set up some additional functions. So we used our standard blank model, just copied that, and we now have our model set up here. So there are a couple things that we needed to add in here. We needed to add our smoke in, which is SG switch, and then we want to have our lights set up on switches. Now our lights main, that's this switch here. We're having another channel for gear lights, but the thing we want to do with the gear lights is we want to have a way to override the gear lights. So if you want them off, you can still turn them off. So we've set up a logical switch here for gear lights, and I'll show you what we did. So we go into advanced properties, logical switches, we set this one up, and it's called gear light. It's enabled, and basically it's our SC switch needs to be in the lights on position, and our gear needs to be in the down position. So if you're landing and you don't want those lights on, you can turn your lights off and the gear will stay down, but the lights will turn off. Then what we did is we go into model, our function assignment, and this lights gear is controlled by logical switch. I'll just add it in here so you guys can see it. So logical switch, our gear light switch. And there we go. So now our basic radio layout is set up. Here's our master wire harness from Sky Candy. So pretty straightforward here. Everything's labeled. This is a custom setup, so it's not something you just order off their website. Sal at Sky Candy does these up for me because he knows exactly how I do my installs, and this is just a wicked system. So we've got our battery input here. We are going to be running a separate battery for the lights because with this many lights, there's going to be a fairly large draw. So we've got our plugins here from our radio, so channel 1 master, and our gear lights. Those both go to an SPO6 switch. So there's 2 SPO6 switches, which are Jetty, but they are generic switches that work with any radio system. And those now feed the different circuits. So we've got our gear circuit here. So our gear light, gear light, gear light, those are controlled by a Castle Creations 10 amp BEC. These lights only run at 4.8 to 6 volts, so they don't need the full voltage. And then we've got all of our other lights here. So we've got our 2 top and bottom beacon and strobes. We've got our tail strobe with additional wiring in the other packages. And we've got our wing lights here. Now the wing lights are 11 volts or 3-cell LiPo for our nav lights. All of our strobes, or this strobe back here, will also have a step down in it as well. So everything's pre-wired and just super easy to install. All right, so just familiarizing myself with the wiring harnesses here, and everything looks good. Once I've got things laid out, it's pretty straightforward. We've got our main fuselage wiring harness here. This basically is going at the split of the fuselage. And then we've got our 2 wing wiring harnesses there. So everything's very straightforward, nice, easy, should be nice and simple. So generally with a project like this, the first thing we do is start at the back and work our way forward, which is what we're going to do in this first video. Now, because we have the light system to install, we do have some things to consider. So the only light going in our back end here is going to be our light back here. So there's a really nice light and housing that goes in the back. So we have to think about that. So just to summarize what we're going to be doing in the back end, we're going to be dealing with that light. We're going to do our 2 elevator surfaces along with our rudder surface. We're going to be changing our pipe, and we're going to be changing our tail cone. So that's all the stuff to deal with in the back end. I think the best thing to do for this is going to be to split this fuselage, which we have to do anyways to get that pipe out. Okay, so we've got our hatch off here. First thing we're going to do is we are going to split the fuselage. That will allow us access to our pipe and everything. Then we'll be pulling out the tanks. The kit comes with these multiple pieces of fiberglass laminated plywood. And for most turbines, you're going to be using the skinny guys. I've tried the Zykoy in there, the Swewin. They both require these guys to get things centered. And then it also comes with a thicker pair as well. I think JetCat's probably going to require those guys. So when we did the unboxing, we just lightly put our fuselage together. So we'll just split that and start working on our tail. All right, so we've got the fuselage split, and I'm just pulling the smoke tank out right now. One of our fasteners for joining the fuselage together is underneath that smoke tank. So there is the smoke tank removed, and now we've got good access to our back end. Okay, so first thing we're going to do here is we are going to pull out the pipe, and the tail cone is going to come off, and then we're going to work on getting our light installed for our Sky Candy light setup. So the pipe itself looks like 3 screws, and it should slip straight out. All right, so we've got the back end tail cone off, and that's pretty straightforward. There's 3 bolts that hold it in place, and we have marked the center location for our light. Now the rear Sky Candy light, very simple to put in. Basically, you want to drill that hole. This angle in the PVC piece is cut exactly the same as this angle right here. The only thing is, when you drill this hole, you've got to drill it like this. You don't want to drill it like that, otherwise it's not going to work. So we're going to drill this hole and see what kind of support we need to add in there to mount the light. But that is going to be the first step in working our way forward. So getting the rudder surface set up here, the output shaft goes away from the surface, you can see there. And the data sheet calls for a 1.5 inch servo arm, which would be about 35 millimeter servo length. So we've got the MKS carbon arms here. These are 30 from the outside hole, so center to center, and sits really well. And when I go to the full travel of the surface, which is about here, you can see there that looks like that arm should work well, because that's the end of our distance that we can travel, and we're just almost touching the skin. So if I had a 35 millimeter one, I would probably use it. And then if we go this direction, there's no problem there. So this is the arm that we're going to end up using, is the 30 millimeter arm, and it should be perfect. So the stock hardware is awesome. I did end up taking the 2 nuts out, and this is all metric stuff. So you got metric threads on both sides. This ball joint is regular threads. The one marked with the little lines here, those are reverse threads. So you can adjust those with the linkage rod by itself. When we do put this together, we are going to probably put Loctite or CA on each of those threaded rods, because we don't have lock nuts there. All right, so we got our rudder set up here. Pretty straightforward. Just screwed the servo down, ran the line out. We're plugged into our current rudder port. The servo is powered right now. So a couple things that we changed here. We used a little bit smaller hardware on the fastening to the actual servo arm itself. If we're using an aluminum arm, then we would just use the stock screw because it's a little bit longer. We just shorten that guy up a little bit. Put Loctite on both of these sets of threads on the rod, and right now it's adjusted, and I'm just leaving that for the Loctite to set up. So we're perfectly centered right now on the point right up here on the vertical stab. And the other thing I did was add a washer right here. It works if you don't put the washer in there, because the carbon is flexible and squishes down, but I'd like to have a little bit more space here between these 2 arms, so I just put a thick washer in there, and we've got that all screwed down. So we're just going to leave that be and let that Loctite set up, and our rudder is good to go. We're going to add a little bit of snakeskin over top of this servo lead here, and we are changing our leads. So the stock lead on the wiring harness, nothing wrong with this lead, but the way I like to do things is have a locking lead on all of our surfaces. So we'll have the wire come out of the little hole right there, and then we'll put a Ashlock locking 3-pin clip on the vertical stab and both of the horizontals. All right, so we've gone through our wiring harness for the joining the 2 sections here, and the servo leads I have marked out. So we've got the leads marked on this side, and then the leads marked on the side that plug into the receiver setup. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to put our snakeskin over top of our wire here, and we're going to put our ash lock end on the servo end. And jumping back to the back section here, so in order to support the light, what I did was I took some can foam, which is like window and door foam, and I just put some in the bottom of this section right here. So once this is all cured, we'll just cut that out, and that'll be a nice firm support for our light that weighs almost nothing. There's very little access to this area, so that's a pretty simple solution to create a nice bed for that to sit on. The other thing I did was tape our new stainless exhaust cone on. So basically taped all around the bottom, and we're just going to drill those holes out from the inside. We are not using the same holes. We've rotated the cone just a little bit, so we're going to be drilling brand new holes. All right, so tail cone is complete. It's a very accurate fit, so it perfectly follows the outside of the fuselage here. So as you're putting this in, if you've upgraded to the stainless tail cone, even if you take those little tabs in there and rotate them, that's going to shift things around a little bit. So just play around with it. Obviously, if you mess up, you just take that and you just rotate it again or the other direction a little bit. But that was pretty straightforward, so that part's done. All right, so here is our differences in pipes. I'll see if I can get this to show up for you guys on the camera. We're a little bit larger on the aftermarket pipe here versus the stock pipe. On the outside diameter, inside diameter, you can see there's a fairly substantial difference. If you're going on the smaller end of the turbine size of things, the stock pipe should be fine. It's built, looks like quite strong. We've got a whole bunch of reinforcement welds and all that stuff, and it's a pretty thick pipe. The JT Hobby pipe is a little bit larger diameter, so for our larger turbines, this is going to be a little bit better. Now what we need to do is, because the stock setup is this size and our pipe is a little bit bigger, we need to sand out the rear part of the fuselage where this goes through. So I'm going to take that metal tail cone off now, and then we'll work on getting the pipe fit. All right, and it's time for another episode of Tip Time, and this Tip Time is brought to you by Trusty Bent Screwdriver. All right, so this episode of Tip Time revolves around continuity. So what do we do in a scenario like this where we received a wiring harness? We've got two leads here that are both red and black. We've got two leads here without an end on them, and we've got our snakeskin already installed. Well, that comes down to continuity. All right, so I've got a couple different voltmeters, but this is the one that I carry to the field in my toolbox. It's a nice small little guy. Had this for so long, and works great. It's from Radio Shack. That's how old it is. So anyways, all of the voltage meters will always have continuity on them. So that is this top one right there. Looks like the volume symbol is what it is. So what continuity does is it completes or tells you when you have a complete circuit. So if we touch these two leads together, you can hear the sound. So all we have to do is simply put our one lead in there, and we know that this wire is this wire. If we touch the other one, obviously it's not continuous. And we're just going to mark these guys so we know which ones are which with a yellow dot. And we'll just confirm because I turned my back on it. There we go. So that is a quick little tip about continuity. A voltmeter is definitely a valuable tool for your arsenal of tools, but having that and continuity and being able to figure out circuits like this is very valuable. All right, so we've got our tail cone off, and we're going to take our Dremel and take a couple millimeters off each of these pipe supports until the exhaust pipe fits in there comfortably. All right, so these areas on the tail is where I like to install my 3 or 4 millimeter through fitting. These are available on my website. They're great for Festo line, 4 millimeter Festo line, but I also use them in this kind of case to protect the servos when they come through the fuselage. So rather than just having the servo wires come through the fiberglass in the fuselage, you've got a nice 3D printed grommet or through fitting for them to come through. So just enlarge the hole using my Align reamer tool. Take a little bit of medium or thick CA, put it around the through fitting, and then I will just pop this in place, spray some kicker, and now we've got a nice spot for our servos to come through. Okay, so we've got our pipe opening done. That's sized appropriately for our pipe. Now before we put our pipe back in, our tail cone on, we want to get our wiring done in the tail end, which includes getting our light installed. Now this spray foam in here has had plenty of time to cure, a few hours now, so now we can trim this out a little bit to make our light sit in there properly. And then with this light, we can also get the rest of our wiring harness done up for the tail end. Okay, so for our tail strobe, thank you, Sal. Hopefully you watched this video from Sky Candy. I love the labeling. It makes this so easy. So this is installed in the front of the empennage inside the flap cavity, so which is perfect. So we've got this tail strobe harness, which is this guy right here, and we've got everything labeled. So this goes to the harness, this goes to the LED, which is awesome. So this is going to plug in to here. We've just got to make sure we flip our leads around a little bit so they line up properly. And this is going to go back to our tail light, which is that guy right there. So we'll have a little bit of an extension built onto there, but this at least gives us an idea of what we are looking at for wiring in the tail section. So we're all ready to install our pipe here in the back end. I'll just show you guys our details. So we've got our light installed. That worked out great. We've got all of our servo ends here with our ash lock connectors installed. Now, the reason for the zip tie is more or less just so there is some relief there for our wires going into the ash lock connectors. Now, if we were wiring this from scratch and not use the wiring harness, I would generally have shrink tube through here, and because the harness, it doesn't really allow us to do that. I don't want to leave a bunch of excess inside the fuselage, so I couldn't leave, I couldn't pull out a few inches to put our stuff on there and just push the excess inside, because then we may hit the pipe. So anyways, that's not really a big deal. Generally with this type of airframe, the rudder always stays on. The horizontal stabs, usually they're always staying on as well, depending on how it's transported. So, but these are pretty straightforward. So that is good to go. We've got our wire harness done up here. We've got our beacon light stuff installed in the bottom corner there. It's tucked away. I covered that in heat shrink. And yeah, we're good to go. We're good to install our tail cone in the back here first. So that's the first thing we'll do is we'll pop the tail cone on, get it nice and centered, and then we'll slide our pipe through the front end and get that screwed into place. All right, so we got our pipe installed. Quite simple to put that guy in, just almost bolt it through the previous holes. That worked out great, and happy with that. Now if you move to the back end here, you can see our tail cone, and that too is absolutely beautiful. That's a nice setup. I love it. So we can set our tail section aside now, and we are going to pull out our horizontal stabs and get those things completed. All right, so elevators, quite simple to set up. We screwed our servo in place. We ended up using the exact same horn that we used on the rudder. So it is the long MKS, or I guess medium size, 40 millimeter MKS carbon arm. And we are using the middle hole, which is actually 30 millimeters center to center. And if you watch this guy here, so full travel, I've reduced it a little bit, but just with my Expo menu, but you can see there, we're actually getting more travel than recommended right now, and we don't have any interference on the surface. So 30 mil arm worked out perfect, and just making some notes here on my paper so you can see there. So the 40 millimeter MKS carbon arm, but middle hole, which is 1 3/16 or 30 millimeters, center to center. All right, so here is one of our elevators, horizontal stabs all finished. So we've got a piece of snake skin that goes all the way back to the actual servo itself, and piece of shrink tubing and our ash lock connector. So this is a great way to set this up, and the excess just gets tucked into the actual surface itself. and we'll be nice and rock solid. So let's get the other one done up, and we'll get these guys installed on the tail. All right, so we got our horizontal stabs on the rear portion of the tail. We've got our vertical all ready to install here, so we did the same thing with our ash lock connector and our heat shrink and everything. Now this rudder or vertical stab is held on with a nice big bolt on the leading edge here. So it's a shoulder bolt, so this entire section in here spins, and the threads start fairly deep inside there. So that's how the rudder's held on. So we'll get the vertical stab installed. Vertical stab is on, and that, guys, wraps up video number 1 in the assembly of the BDX aircraft. So far this thing has been an absolute treat to put together, and the quality is outstanding. If you're not aware, I've got a BDX on order for myself, and it should be here very, very soon. So I'm excited for that aircraft to show up, and we'll do a nice short condensed video on that aircraft as well. Back end of this aircraft is finished. We are going to wrap this video up now. Next video, we're going to probably put the fuselage together, and we're going to start working on the wings. That's going to be the focus of video number 2. Thanks, guys, for watching. I encourage you to check out the Lighter Side of RC After Dark. The After Dark channel is where we do live streams here from the shop for about 2 hours every 2 weeks. It's tons of fun because you and I get to communicate during the live stream if you're on there, and it is a blast. I love it. We usually have some people here as well too. So thanks, guys, for watching. Thanks for tuning into the videos, and we'll see you in the next video.